Ok, pues vamos a empezar. Hola, soy Mariana Pérez Vargas, directora general de Avantare Consultores y Lead Appraisers. Bienvenidas y bienvenidos al webinar CMMI y Agile pueden coexistir o Discover How to Harmonize CMMI and Agile for Optimal Performance. Estamos muy emocionados, tanto Avantare como Isaka, de que nos acompañen el día de hoy. Espero que disfruten mucho la sesión y encuentren muy valiosa la información que Ron les va a compartir el día de hoy. Un par de anuncios. La presentación del webinar va a estar en inglés, pero pueden activar en el Zoom la traducción de los subtítulos en español o en el idioma que gusten. E igualmente el chat está abierto para que puedan hacer sus preguntas. También las pueden hacer en español. Y Elia Almeraz, quien es instructora oficial de CMMI, nos va a ayudar a traducir sus preguntas y a enviárselas a Ron. Y bueno, ahora les quiero presentar a Ron, que tiene una gran experiencia y es nuestro gran invitado el día de hoy. Ron es vicepresidente de modelos y marcos en Isaka, tiene más de 40 años de experiencia en diferentes áreas como mejora del rendimiento, desarrollo de productos, ingeniería, ciberseguridad, gestión de servicios, gestión de calidad, de proveedores, de datos, inteligencia artificial y digital trust. Ron es el arquitecto y nada más y nada menos que el autor principal del modelo de CMMI y otros estándares y modelos. Ron fue el líder y quien desarrolló e hizo el lanzamiento de las versiones 2.0 y 3.0 del modelo CMMI y del CMMI Performance Solutions. Ron ayuda a las organizaciones a lograr la mejora continua, el rendimiento empresarial, la calidad y la resiliencia en ciberseguridad. Además, es instructor certificado para el modelo CMMI y es Lead Appraiser de alta madurez. Ron ha realizado más de 300 evaluaciones para clientes de diversas industrias, incluyendo la aeroespacial, la automotriz, defensa y biométrica, entre otras. Biomédica, perdón. La misión de Ron es capacitar y empoderar a las organizaciones para que alcancen sus objetivos y aporten valor a sus stakeholders, mediante una comprensión clara, objetiva y cuantitativa de lo que es calidad, el calendario y el rendimiento de los costos. Welcome, Ron. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you with us in this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Gracias, Mariana. Hola, everyone. It's very nice to be here. I want to thank our colleagues at Avantare and our Osaka colleagues here internally for helping to set this all up. I'm very excited to share tonight's presentation with you, and I do hope that this will be an interactive presentation. I'm going to go through a handful of topics. Some of you, looking at some of the names, I recognize many of you. Welcome. It's good to see your at least names, if not your faces. And so some of you are going to see some stuff that you've seen before, and then we'll get into the heart of the topic tonight, which is really about merging and harmonizing CMMI 3.0, Agile, and DevSecOps together for optimal performance. And that's going to be, hopefully we'll have a little fun while we go. I do have some, a few tongue-in-cheek comments throughout, so bear with me as we go through that. Hopefully the jokes will translate well. So we're going to talk about 5 basic topics. The primary topic I want to get to and spend most of the time on topic 5 here, but we'll talk a little bit about why CMMI, who uses it, what is the CMMI all about, just to give everybody kind of a common grounding, and then what kind of results can you expect as an organization adopting CMMI. And then really the heart of tonight's presentation is around how does CMMI, Agile, and DevSecOps work together? How does CMMI address Agile needs? How does Agile and DevSecOps work with CMMI? How do I get started? Those kinds of things. And I do want to do some, I'll call it myth busting around some of the common misperceptions about CMMI and Agile, and we'll try to tackle some of those. So we are going to have Q&A at the end, so be prepared with your questions. You can be posting those as we go. I'll say this now, and we'll try to remind you at the end. The Avantare team will be sending out a survey. If you want a copy of the slides, and we have an article that we can share with you about strengthening your Agile performance using CMMI. Both of those are going to be available to you after you complete your survey. So once you send your survey in, we'll give you guys a copy of the slides in PDF format, as well as that article that I mentioned. So please do fill out that survey. We use that. It's all about performance improvement, as you all know. So we want to make sure that we learn from this so that the next webinars and the next events we do like this will be better and better every time we do them. All right, so first we're going to talk a little bit about why CMMI, and this all starts with the topic of capabilities. It's in the title, capability, maturity, model, integration. And all organizations have capabilities. What most organizations, or many, do not have is a habitual and persistent process by which they can measure their different capabilities against a common, well-understood set of best practices, and then pinpoint and target the ones that are the most important to driving higher performance. That's where the CMMI comes in. We did this survey quite some time ago. The data is pretty much the same now, showing that a lot of organizations don't have standard processes or standard planning processes, or knowing what they know what to measure. And organizations need to build capabilities, and most organizations don't even realize they have capabilities. So let me define that term for you. We define it the same way that McKinsey does, which is fairly simple. It's anything that a business needs to do well to do its business. So if you want to increase customer satisfaction, if you want to deliver products on time, faster, cheaper, better, if you want to increase your profitability, increase your productivity, decrease your risks, capabilities are how organizations address that. They build the capabilities, they identify new ones, and then they hone and harmonize and identify ways to improve those capabilities. And that is the heart of what CMMI is all about. And when you talk to organizations, a lot of them can't explain what their capabilities are or how well they compare to other organizations. And again, CMMI can help them with that. I want to recap this because this came from the early days of when we were first building CMMI version 2.0, which is now 3.0. So this dates back almost 10 years now, but the key value propositions are still very relevant, and they're still very much at the heart of what CMMI Performance Solutions is trying to achieve. One is, I need to manage the key capabilities that drive my unique business. But I also want to rapidly improve my business. I want to innovate. I want to make sure that I address new markets, new needs, new customers. While I'm doing that, I'd like to lower the total cost of ownership. And I want to be able to demonstrate that I have this capability so I can get new customers and show them that I can continually get better, innovate, and improve. And part of what this is the model was built and completely overhauled from about 2014 through 2019, when we started accepting version 2.0 appraisals. And these bullets on the left really explain what we tried to do: open architecture, flip the model from a process improvement compliance model over to a performance improvement model, and also looked at things like simplified wording to help with translations and understanding and adoption. But to provide, and this fourth bullet is at the heart of what this topic tonight is about, providing context-specific information and content to give organizations the ability to address and adopt new and different methodologies like Agile and DevSecOps. And then you're going to hear me say this one over and over again. It is the quintessential pillar of everything that CMMI 3.0 is all about, and that is performance. So performance is at the heart of the model. We wove it throughout the model. You'll see it in the value statements. You'll see that the practice area of managing performance and measurement is the largest practice area in the model, with very much intent of design. So that's all part of packaging of what we did with 3.0. And we have some pretty amazing results that we can share you that are verified and validated independently by our ISACA certified partners and lead appraisers and their appraisal teams, to follow our method to go out and independently verify that those maturity levels that they're giving out and that they're awarding to organizations are actually reflective in how their business is performing as well. And we'll talk more about that as I go through. So what CMMI can do for you: It can give you this outcome-based approach to build your capabilities so you can do things faster, better, and cheaper. It is a globally accepted standard or model that improves and enhances organizational capability and performance. And we are recognized worldwide as writing the book on what maturity levels are all about. If you look at any other maturity level model in the world, and that includes CMMC here in the United States, there's several other maturity models out there. Even NIST here in the United States, they use what they call the cybersecurity framework. I went to one of their meetings and a whole bunch of people in those groups were saying, we use the CSF framework for our cybersecurity, but we don't have a way to measure it. So we use the CMMI maturity levels to assess how we are doing from a maturity perspective. CMMI provides that pathway to be able to say how, from an evolutionary pathway, I can move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4 in a very clear and demonstrable way that delivers and actually gives the organization measurable results. This is just a timeline, and I'll just tell you this, I'm not going to hit every single thing on these slides. There's a lot of information here. Again, fill out that survey and you'll have access to all this information. I'm just going to be highlighting a few key points. One here is to recognize the lineage of CMMI. We've been around for close to 30-some plus years, starting back with the Department of Defense in 1987 and launching the software maturity model, capability maturity model. And then that was integrated with the FAA system engineering model to create the CMMI. And then over time, we moved forward. And then 2.0 was launched in 2018. The new model was put out then, and we started accepting appraisals for that in 2019. Also, an ancillary program based on CMMI version 2.0. Many of you are familiar and participating in this program. The Medical Device Discovery Appraisal Program, or MDAP as we call it, used CMMI 2.0 and now 3.0 to address this collaborative initiative between the FDI and the Medical Device Innovation Consortium and ISACA to address key issues in the medical device industry on improving device quality and innovation. So we know that the CMMI works because that program alone is demonstrating that it actually is working well for what FDA is looking for. And then dial forward to the present now, 2019 on, we released 3.0 last year, 2023. It includes multiple domains now because we were seeing the demand for that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So who uses CMMI? Quick statistics here. Since we launched in 2019, we've had in 2023, for example, alone, that was a record year. We had over 5,000 appraisals conducted worldwide. Since 2019, we've had nearly 14,000 organizations appraised against CMMI. That's based on all of the information that we've been given. Those organizations have to submit those reports and so forth back to ISACA, and then we go through and review those. That basically translates to 14,673 appraisals. And some of those are organizations who have been appraised more than once. Most of you who are familiar with the CMMI know that the benchmark appraisals got a 3-year validity period. So some of these organizations go through the process more than once in that time period. But the bottom line here, this lower half of the sliders, are some really interesting information. The performance report, that's a requirement in the benchmark appraisal process, has identified since we launched over 50,000 business objectives. Now, these are the objectives that the organizations being appraised report themselves as saying, this is important to my business. Things like, I want to improve quality. I want to lower defect rates. I want to improve my schedule performance. I want to improve my cost performance. And our appraisal teams, who are certified and trained in this process, go through and verify and validate that information through the appraisal process and through the performance report. And the overwhelming, amazing number that comes out of that, of those 50,000 plus objectives, 90% of them were being achieved. The numbers are really 86% at the time of the appraisal, with another 4% about to be achieved. And that's all been delivered by our CMMI partners, who are globally sitting at 390 right now worldwide. And those are the folks who help deliver training, appraisals, and so forth, like our Avantari partners. This is just a nice logo field to give you an idea. These are large companies that you can clearly recognize. You'll also recognize a bunch of United States and other agencies, the military, Department of Defense, NASA, and so forth. But I'll point out a lot of these organizations also put up their own money to the CMMI Institute when we were building CMMI 2.0 and 3.0 to help make the model better. So companies like Booz Allen Hamilton, NASA, Siemens, Northrop Grumman, BAE, et cetera, they all pitched in money of their own to help drive and improve CMMI. And I'll point out a couple of, FDA is on here, but look in the lower right corner, the General Administration Office in the United States, they have a CMMI license and they go in and audit government contractors all over the government. They use CMMI to help provide those audited companies and agencies with solutions to fix their audit problems. So respectable list here. The other thing, as I'll point out, I'm happy to announce today that today we have signed into agreement that IBM is going to sponsor our CMMI Artificial Intelligence Working Group, which are our latest and greatest content development activities. We're planning for a release of AI with the CMMI in 2025. And stay tuned for more on that. We're putting out a lot of announcements about that, but we signed that agreement with IBM today, and we're going to be putting out an announcement and a press release on that very shortly. So we're very happy to see that arrangement going forward. So what industries use CMMI? It's a broad spectrum here. It's not just government agencies, although they are part of this, but we have a broad category. These are codes that people enter when they put in CAS appraisals. CMMI appraisal system is what CAS stands for, and it includes anything from computer programming, consultancy, and general IT, information services, scientific and technical activities, telecom, financial services, and a whole plethora of others. So it's applicable to multiple industries, and the way we've set up the architecture and now the new domains is it's customizable to any industry. So we're in discussions right now globally with multiple agencies. For example, at the Isle of Man in the UK, they're looking at new cybersecurity and other standards that they want to put in place, and they're talking to us about using CMMI to address those new standards. So we're very happy to set that up, and we're going to continue to work those. But as you can see, CMMI does apply to a broad spectrum of industries. All right, so let's talk about the model and the content itself, and then we're going to jump right into Agile. So 5 components in the performance solution ecosystem. They're integrated. The previous way this was developed was these things were done relatively independently of each other. There was a team that developed the model. There was a team that developed the appraisal method. There was a team that developed training and certification. These are all now integrated within ISACA. There are multiple teams working this, but they're all working it under an integrated product approach. The model is at the heart of that. So when we plan for updates with the model, like we're doing for 2025 with artificial intelligence, that will come first. Following that will be updates to things like the training and certification, our systems and tools, our adoption guidance, and the appraisal method. So we address them all in a very sequential and very systematic format and approach. And it really comes down to the demand that we have from folks. When we release the model, we have a tendency to let that sit there for a little while so people can get used to understanding what the new content's all about. And it gives them time to go in and update and change their processes so they can get ready for appraisals. So we usually see a lag time anywhere from 6 months to a year where we do a model release, and then appraisals are typically then put online after that. We can start accepting those appraisals. Just to give you a little bit of a heads up, for 2025, we are not anticipating any changes to appraisal method at this point. So the 8 domains that we have now, including development, which is the most common one, will still be the same way they are in 2025. The biggest addition will be additional content around Agile and punch list items that we have in the model, but also artificial intelligence. So those are the things we're doing. We have integrated systems to support this, our appraisal tool, our course management system. The model itself is moved from a book format into an online model viewer format. You can also download a PDF, but we have plans for updating and improving and enhancing the model viewer for a much better experience, a much more online experience to make it a lot easier for people to use, understand, adopt, annotate, and so forth. So it's a little teaser for you for things coming in 2025. And lastly, adoption guidance. In previous versions of the model, previous to 2.0, adoption guidance was basically all over the place. There wasn't an integrated approach to it. There wasn't a common approach. That changed with version 2.0, and it's been kept up to date. So we have an adoption guidance handbook now. We also have an acquisition handbook. We have tech talk videos that help people deep dive into specific topics. There's a whole plethora of resources, guidance, and so forth for helping organizations make sure that their adoption is quick, easy, effective, and they don't have to go through a bunch of false starts. All the levels in CMMI, all the practice areas are organized by practice group levels. They are levels 1 through 5. You can see how they're defined here. Level 1 is the initial level. You can get a maturity level 1 now, maturity level 2, 3, 4, and 5. At level 4 and 5, that's what we refer to as our high maturity practice areas. That's where you're using statistical and quantitative techniques to drive your performance improvement. So you can move at level 1 where you're unpredictable. You can move to level 2 where you're more proactive, and level 3 where you're even organizationally more proactive, to level 4 and 5 where you can start actually predicting your performance, and you can assess confidence levels and probabilities around how much you're going to achieve those goals and those targets. All the content includes curated evolutionary best practices that are recognized worldwide as the gold standard for defining maturity and capability levels. They say that imitation is the highest form of flattery. There's been a lot of organizations out there that have adopted maturity levels based on what we've done with CMMI. Very few of them have picked up on this idea about using it to coincide with performance measurement as well. So we're really happy to know that that's still the case, and we're working on making sure that that's still effective and it's very useful to organizations. This gives you an overview of the core practice areas of the model. And again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are the most common practice areas that are common to almost any business. Things like how to make decisions, how to manage your configuration and version control, how do you get to root cause analysis, how do you develop your processes, how do you plan, how do you estimate, how do you monitor and control, how do you test, verify, how do you manage risk. All those are covered here in the core practice areas. You'll see that they go through various levels. Not all of them go up to level 5, but several of them do. Core is what is required for any other domain if you're targeting a maturity level. So let me jump to my next slide. These are the 8 domains that are now contained within version 3.0. They're domain-specific practice areas across 8 major domains now. So we have data management, development, people management, safety, security, services, supplier management, and virtual work. All of those are now, you can pick 1, 2, or all of them now under 3.0 to conduct an appraisal. You can identify all of them or one of them to go after adoption, to go after gap assessments and so forth. And the reason we put that in place is this graph on the left. Since 2019, we saw this early on, even in the next gen stages in 2014, that CMMI needed to evolve beyond just development because other things came into play. Name a software shop that you guys have worked with or talked to that doesn't have to worry or be concerned about security. I haven't run into a single one to date. But if you look at the growth here between 2019 and 2023, we've had over a 40% increase in moving from multi-domain appraisals now. We're seeing that. And some of these domains are new. So remember, a benchmark appraisal is a 3-year validity period. We're expecting this to take about 3 years to really start taking hold. And we are seeing those things pick up and people adopt them going forward. All right, so let's start debunking some myths. One of the myths that we've heard in the past, CMMI is only for large organizations because they're the only ones who can afford to document all these processes and put all this stuff in place. Well, the data tells us a little bit of a different story here. Notice here, 73%, if you add the 16% on small companies at 51 to 100 FTEs, you're now talking about 89% of the companies who've adopted CMMI are small companies, less than 100 FTEs. CMMI also applies to large companies. You can see a lot of the large system integrators are still here. So it applies to any size company out there. First myth debunked. So now let's talk about sustaining habit and persistence. This is also a key part of what CMMI 2.0 and 3.0 has done, which is to make sure that this isn't something that's done for the sake of appraisal. It's done to change how the capability and performance of the business is operation and how it's moving forward. So CMMI contains our entire capability of best practices for making sure that after the appraisal, all of this effort, all of these activities, all of these processes become the way the organization operates. It's how we do our work. And that is a key principle in CMMI also, to make sure that this is done and that it's a lasting and effective way to continue to build and improve your performance. And then I mentioned before, the adoption process didn't really exist before. It's 6 basic steps. It's very similar to Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act. We've added a couple here just to make sure to clarify, particularly around establishing objectives. That's different than Plan, Do, Check, Act, because CMMI measures performance. And in order to measure performance, you have to have objectives to measure against. So we've included that. So we start off with learning about the model, establishing your objectives for capabilities and improvement, doing a gap assessment to analyze where you are, develop an action plan based on that gap assessment, deploy your improvements based on those action plans, and then reassess and get ready for finally to be able to get your benchmark and your maturity level. So that's our 6 steps. That's all contained in this adoption guide. When you guys do fill out that survey and send that in, you'll get access to these files. All these links are live. You'll be able to go in and pull down much of this information. A lot of these things are free. They're absolutely free to go in and use, things like the adoption guide itself and the acquisition manager's handbook. Lastly, I'm going to touch on appraisals just to give you tie the bow on the whole ecosystem here. The appraisal process is simply the watch. And by that, I mean, all appraisals are a snapshot in time. It's an organization of trained, certified, independent appraisal teams. They go in, they follow these 4 phases, and they look at the objective evidence resulting from the capabilities and business processes being performed by the projects in the organization. And then they assess that against the CMMI model, and then they capture that information and report their. So again, the appraisal is the watch. It's just simply measuring where you are against the model. It's not the end game. It's certainly not the end of the race. It is a measurement step along the journey. And I want to make sure that that's really well understood by everybody. The MDAP program that I mentioned earlier, they do not do maturity levels. They do not do benchmark appraisals. The FDA is interested in continuous improvement. We've been having discussions with the Air Force, with the Army. They're looking at that MDAP program for similar things. Benchmarks and maturity levels, in their eyes, aren't the end game. It's that continuous performance approach and mindset that they're looking for. So we're having discussions with them about that. There's some other options here. There are 4 types of appraisals. Benchmark are where you get the initial maturity or capability level rating. We have sustainment appraisals to be a more frequent touch point. And then we have what we call action plan reappraisals. If you have a near miss, that's what phase 4 is about. But again, remember, appraisals are snapshot in time. They're ways to measure where you are in your journey. And that's it. They're not the be all and end all of everything from a CMMI perspective. All right, so what results can I expect if I'm an organization adopting CMMI? I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I'm going to hit some highlights. This performance report is available to you in our CMMI Resource Center. You'll see the sections here laid out. We talk about the relevant market sectors, the locations, what domains are coming into play, the size of the organization. And then we go into some pretty thorough detail about what areas are improving, what are the most improved categories, popular categories, comparing categories. There's a lot of really useful information in this report. I would encourage you all, download it, read it. There's an executive overview to begin with, and then there's a lot of detailed information in it. I'm going to hit a few highlights here. One is upper left corner here. Look at the time, or look at these numbers in terms of some of the most common targeted areas. These are areas that are important to customers. I want to know that if I actually buy services or products from someone that they're going to deliver things on time. Schedule performance using CMMI has increased overall 33%. Schedule variance reduced by 48%. Productivity improved by an average of 17%. Defect and density rates down a whopping 31%, and customer satisfaction improving by 13%. So you're seeing this where CMMI is continually given a way to help organizations use this sort of self-raising bar. I've been assessed before. Next time around, I'm going to have new improvement targets and new areas and new things to improve. And that performance report that I mentioned, as well as the value statements and the other content in the model, are where people go to get that value out of the CMMI. So we're seeing 5 years. That performance report has 5 years of consistent performance results. And I don't know of any other standard or model in the world that actually has this kind of data to demonstrate it. The last thing I'll say here is the performance report and the performance emphasis in CMMI came specifically from end-use customers when we're developing CMMI 2.0 and now 3.0. And by that, I mean customers like the Department of Defense and end-use commercial customers were saying, okay, Ron, we're getting our maturity levels, but we're still seeing people have overrun schedules and overrun costs and having bad defect rates and everything. They don't really line up for us. Can you fix that? Well, the team took that on. Like I said, we had an entire performance working group to do this. And part of what they came up with this idea of the performance report. And a lot of customers really like this. Some so much, in fact, they built the performance report into their own company's processes because it gives them insight into something they've never had before. And that is, how am I doing against my most critical business activities? And again, it's our appraisal team's responsibilities, and they have been trained to do this. There's also a performance guide, practical guide to fill it out to help people do this. They go in and validate and verify that as part of the appraisal activity. So when there's a benchmark appraisal, the performance report is now part of that, so they can compare and validate. This organization's level 3, I'm seeing the kind of performance expectations I should see out of a level 3 organization. And that was the big driver and the reason we have this. And it's a central pillar, again, to what we have in CMMI. And I just want to show you this box and whisker because it really shows you, look at the low level of variation between these things. It's very consistent. We're seeing that 90% achievement rate across these 50-some thousand objectives, but the variation is pretty tight. It's showing high level of consistency on cost management, functionality, organizational finance, process, quality, et cetera. So apparently CMMI seems to be hitting the mark for most of these. And yeah, there are outliers here and so forth, as you expect from thousands of data points. But overall, pretty tight patterns, and we're very happy to see this. And we did see the overall increase rate from before 2019 to 2022 and 2023, we saw a 1.7 uptick in that appraisal success rate too. So we're very happy to see that. So key takeaways from the performance report: clear, tangible performance results across multiple types of industries, proven effective approach to help get the kind of performance you want out of things like Agile and DevSecOps, and then persistent habitual performance improvement. So now let's talk about the heart of what we want to do. So let's talk about the myths with Agile. Okay, one of the ones is like badges. We don't need no stinking badges. Agile says you don't need no stinking processes. Okay, and how does a team go about defining what, for example, done or MVP means? In these examples, the definition of done and MVP are very critical to several Agile methodologies like Scrum and Kanban. And you're going to see this little a and big A that I've got in this box, they're intentional. They're not typos. So when you see in the rest of the presentation, big A, that's what real Agile is supposed to be. It's not throwing everything out the door and just skipping steps, also known as Agile washing. Oh, I'm just going to throw some stuff together. I'm going to put a Scrum. We're going to put everything in Jira, and now we're Agile. Yeah, okay. So a couple of jokes for you. Knock, knock. Who's there? Done. Done who? Depends on who you ask. I'm going to go ask the product owner. Well, when our new video has been viewed more times than that evolution of dance guide, that's when we're going to be done. Product manager. It's not done until those 10 missing requirements are back into the functionality. The developer, hold on, it is done. Remember, we dropped those 10 features out from the last sprint when you told me it couldn't be coded in Flash. So they're going to be scheduled later. Let's call it sprint number Omega. And then I've talked to multiple Agile teams. I've worked on multiple Agile teams. MVP means anything to anyone. It's very rare to see that. A good Agile team will get that clearly defined by the team. CMMI helps you address all of these issues. Let's talk about some more. CMMI is too rigid for Agile. It's too much overhead. It slows Agile development down. See, Agile is in development, is incompatible with process models like CMMI. Little a doesn't need to use processes. It's people over process. The manifesto even says that. The Agile team decides everything. Again, Agile washing. I love this Texas quote: a waterfall shop that throws a scrum or two onto their schedule to seem cool. It's the Agile equivalent of a veneer, known in Texas as all hat, no cattle for cowboys. Beware of Agile washing. It's everywhere. It's buzzword bingo. A lot of organizations do it. I like some of these other quotes too. We're going to try something called Agile programming. No more planning, no more documentation. You guys just don't start writing code and we'll start expecting customers to complain. I'm glad it has a name now. And then knock, knock, who's there? Processes and tool. Processes and tool who? See, I told you he was Agile. Doesn't need processes and tool. Oh yeah, we can just do a 15-minute stand-up and we'll be good. Very much more effective. All right, so CMMI is too rigid for Agile, too much process over people, true agility. All right, so if you focus only on compliance and checking the box, you're going to get compliance out of it. Sure, the FDA saw that with the MDAP program, 30 years of audits. They were getting audit results, but they weren't helping to actually let the organization become more innovative, more agile, and focus on performance improvement. They didn't have objective data to help drive that improvement. And they had qualitative information, but they didn't have a lot of the quantitative factors. So what this led to is, and this is at the risk of making Mr. Deming spin in his grave, that whole idea of plan, do, check, act has now become play the game, hand wave that you're doing something new, deflect the attention from the problems, check that box to tell them we're doing everything great here, and then ache from the lack of results. So plan, do, check, act is now play, deflect, check, ache. Lastly, I'd point you to this article. I see that you can see here that it's dated from 2019. It's still very relevant today. This Harvard Business Review article basically provided very clear data that innovation and agile development actually does require discipline to get the kind of outputs that you need. You have to have consistent processes. You have to have a high level of individual accountability and strong leadership. That means having an intentional culture. Guess what helps you to do that? Yes, the CMMI. So, another myth. Agile is incompatible. CMMI doesn't address Agile. Actually, the numbers are quite different. More than 80% of our CMMI appraisals included some form of Agile development. If you look, since this was published in 2017, looking in our CMMI appraisal system, one of the largest sampling subgroups when people set up their CAS appraisals is around Agile development. So Agile and CMMI clearly work very well together, and they're getting better results than Agile teams who are not using CMMI. So let's set the stage for this reality check. So the team decides everything. What happens when the team leaves or moves to a new project? Okay, Darth Vader. Everything is just, the team's decided they don't need a Scrum Master. No, we don't want that. And I know a lot of Agile teams. In fact, I've been to many retrospectives. We're busy having one, and it's at the pub. Sometimes Agile teams get a lot of stuff done with a little alcohol applied. That's okay. Probably not good if it lasts too long, but retrospectives are ways to address that. And CMMI gives you a lot of that information in the model itself. So I want to get through the rest of these slides real quickly so we can get to the Q&A. The rest of these slides are providing you with excerpts from the model. They show how CMMI and Agile and DevSecOps work together and how they're woven throughout. So we talk about a lot of the common things like product release, the sprint retrospective, burn down charts. This is a figure directly out of monitoring control in the models, one of our practice areas. And it shows very clearly the same kind of approach that any Agile team would typically take. What have I done today? What I'm going to do tomorrow? What are my blockers? What happens in the daily stand-up? How do I set up my epics and user stories? So Agile is a methodology. It does require processes. Ceremonies are processes. CMMI is both methodology friendly and it is methodology agnostic. So Agile works very well with CMMI if you do it properly. Let's talk about no deadlines in Agile. And this is an actual quote from a software firm, an IT director that I knew. In modern software development, there's no such thing as a due date. Really? What does your customer say about that? They've paid you money to deliver a product. They probably gave you a due date. I'm sure they don't mention deadlines at all. These are, again, all graphs and all content from this. But CMMI takes a little bit of a different view. We don't mandate you have to do it this way. We give you options. There are multiple options to doing things like estimating, planning, monitoring. Just as one example, you don't have to do the way the model says it. You can pick any other way as long as you're meeting the intent and value statement of those practices and the practice areas. So that's one of the real nice things about the model is that it gives you that ability to actually address Agile in a way that actually fits your organization's culture, your teams, your customers, your processes, your infrastructure, your tools. It's all there. The model gives you all the hooks and deadlines and all the things that go with it. Now, practice areas in the model that directly address Agile, and this is just a summary level. You'll have to buy a model viewer license or get a copy so you can see where all this information is contained. But for example, in our capability area for planning and managing work, 3 of our practice area, the estimating, planning, and monitoring control, all have content around Agile. Improving performance, also 3 practice areas, managing performance and measurement, process change management, and process asset development. So again, we have 6 capability areas that include 16 practice areas with associated best practices for big A, real Agile development, so that you get the results that you're expecting out of it. Agile doesn't use measurements and processes. Again, it's people over processes. So how do you go about measuring your expected outcomes without a basic process or basic steps? These are 2 examples from the model also that talk about here's some Agile activities, here's their purpose, here's some approaches you can take. Very simple, very easy. You can automate these in a lot of tools. Jira, Confluence, those type of tools all have a lot of this stuff built in. That's great. CMMI is happy with that. It works very well. You can track those things as you need to. And then lastly, I want to talk about DevSecOps. For those of you who are working with companies who have DevOps or DevSecOps in place, you'll know tantamount to that, you have to have Agile processes in place. Not Agile washing, not little a, big A, to do it properly. Because if you don't, what happens when you introduce in your continuous improvement, continuous deployment cycle, and you put an error or a bug out there? All it means is it gets out into the field much faster. That's really all it means. So we've got 13 practice areas in the model that cover how DevSecOps works and is integrated very well with both Agile and the rest of the CMMI. So we provide this whole sort of holistic security approach. It ties into our security practice area as well. And it gives you this ability to do continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment in a way that actually gets you the performance results that you're hoping for and looking for in an organization. This is just to give you a quick competitive landscape of how CMMI compares with ISO, Agile, SAFe. One of the biggest things here is Agile has a tendency to be challenging when it comes to scalability to large projects, large organizations, or what if you're a multiple organization doing multiple development activities? It doesn't scale well at all if you have every team doing something different. How do they integrate? How do they work on interfaces? SAFe addresses some of that. Agile addresses a little bit less than that. CMMI with Agile content and DevSecOps addresses all of it. And this is just another different view of the same slide showing some of the similar principles and so forth. And how do you validate these things? We have our maturity level appraisals, our certifications and so forth. So it's a much more consistent approach than, for example, Agile, DevOps, Lean, a lot of others that are basically self-assessment, and it's different for every organization. So let's open up for questions there. Those were my quick high-level views, and I want to just open it up for questions at this point.
Thank you so much, Ron,
Thank you.
for your extensive experience and insight on how CMMI version 3.0 enables and complements Agile and DevOps. Now, Ellie, do we have some questions?
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
passing some of those to Ron.
Just a minute.
Well, I'm reading at it. We utilize the Scale Agile framework, the SAFe, which provides some discipline and structure. It is possible this framework is actually compliant with CMMI, or there is room for Agile washing?
It's a great question, and the answer is yes. We have several organizations that have reported and demonstrated that SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, works extremely well with CMMI and vice versa. We've seen a lot of organizations do similar to that Agile washing concept that I talked about, where it's kind of a veneer. A lot of times in some of these other frameworks and methodologies like SAFe, people will pick the stuff that's easy to do and then declare victory and say, okay, I pulled the fewer tenants out of SAFe and now I'm saying I'm safe. That's not necessarily how CMMI looks at it. It's not necessarily how SAFe looks at it either. But bottom line is that because of SAFe does address that challenge with regular, quote, Agile, whether it's Kanban, Agile with Scrum, etc., SAFe was designed intentionally to help scale Agile teams up. CMMI does a lot of things. If you look and compare the two together, you'll see a lot of similarities, a lot of the same practices and statements and so forth. We've had some folks do some mappings between the two and finds that they're very compatible.
There is one more. Even with SAFe, there's contention with senior leadership about mapping the work, feature development with requirements. Management is more comfortable with waterfall. Any way to counteract that?
That is a great question. It's a similar question that we've gotten, and that is, I have a customer who's level 0 or level 1, and I'm a level 3 organization. How do I deal with them? I would go back to some of the basics that CMMI talks about. First of all, what are your objectives? What are the things you're hoping to achieve? But we talked about performance. I hit on it a lot. But one of the most overlooked areas, but one of the most important areas in CMMI is, how do you translate customer requirements into solutions? We use the term solution in CMMI to address products, services, suppliers, whatever your output is from your capabilities. So in order to address that, the best way I can tell you that works, this question gets senior management's attention every single time. Go in and you ask them one simple question. What keeps you up at night about the business? They answer that question. They have the answer to that question. I guarantee you every good senior manager has an answer to that question. You can then take CMMI and tell them how CMMI addresses that particular problem. You have data now in the performance report. You have data from what we're presenting in these types of webinars to sell. How would you like a solution to solve that problem so you don't have to worry about that anymore? That's the first hook. I've used that multiple times in multiple organizations. In fact, one organization I went in, the software team had gotten their act together. They were maturity level 3. They were moving towards maturity level 5. This was a general manager of a very large site, and they had every single executive leader in that room. And the senior manager, the general manager was like, okay, the software guys are doing this. What else is going on here? The system engineering manager stood up and said, software guys are always the problem. They're the ones who are always behind stuff. This general manager cut the guy off and said, hold the show. Actually, the data is telling us something different. Software is delivering stuff on time. It's you guys in hardware and systems that are causing the problem. Here's our charts. See? How are you going to fix it? Oh, wait a minute. Again, what was keeping that manager up at night? The system engineering team wasn't following the same discipline and getting the same kind of results that the software team was going. Ask that question and then be able to connect the dots for them and lead them right to the path of how CMMI solves that one question for them, and you'll get them every time. I've sold a lot of work that way, by the way, using just that question. All right, I have another question here, Ellie, thank you. What's the reason behind the fact that in the financial tower specifically that no insurance or pension businesses have adopted CMMI? So that's specific. In the performance report, you'll see that it's broken down. We use the general term finance, and when you use the codes that we use, the NICS codes, they have those in there. We don't have any reported appraisals for those two specific subcategories. That's all that's saying. It was just a subnote on that. Great question. You want to find more information about it? Go take a look at that performance report. It'll explain it all to you. Do we have other questions? Okay, we have this question that I think that was kind of the one that we already had. Can we have a slide that explicitly states have to have agile processes in place to use with management that's against it, battling DevSecOps and all IT infrastructures like COTS, virtual machines. We're not getting in processes in place and so forth. Yeah, again, it's back to performance results, right? So are they getting the kind of performance results that they're looking for when they do it with this, I'll say, veneer agile wash approach or DevSecOps wash approach? And they would. The challenge is to be able to show those managers there's a better way of doing things. And yes, it's a cost, but you don't use the word cost. You use the word investment. This is an investment for you to lower your risk, to improve your performance, to build your capability. And yes, CMMI has demonstrable and provable data that shows that it can help you get there faster, better, cheaper. So that investment gives you a much higher return on investment much faster than if you're just trying to do it by slapping together COTS virtual machines and throwing a bunch of automation. I can't tell you how many organizations I've gone in and done appraisals on where they've just thrown tools at the problem. Tools are only as good as the processes and the people that provide the input to them and the output from them. So if you don't have good discipline around that, it's the old garbage in, garbage out. The data you put in is the data you get out. And look, when it comes to artificial intelligence, what we're seeing and learning across the entire world, if your data is not in good shape, your AI is going to go AWOL. It will go off the rails. It will take you down paths you do not want to go. It will take you into areas. You'll be able to do things faster, but that includes making mistakes faster. And some of those mistakes will be big. I'd rather avoid the mistakes and have good discipline in place to be able to address that. So if this is an ask, can we put together a slide for you guys to give you some of these talking points? The answer is yes, we'll be happy to do that. Any other questions? We're about 3 minutes to the hour.
One more, I just sent it to you.
Okay. As organizations continue into software development and apply AI to do their work, how do you see CMMI enabling their process success and outcomes? What are the greatest challenges organizations are facing? I just said the biggest one, data. Data management in the model right now is a key. We put it in there intentionally knowing AI was coming. We didn't know that in 2023 and 2024 it was going to blow completely out of the water with ChatGPT and everything, but we knew it was coming. So data is probably one of the biggest challenges. And the reason, for those of you who are familiar with in the history, the CMMI Institute, and before that, the Software Engineering Institute, had an entire model called the Data Management Maturity Model, or the DMM. All the relevant content that we had there is in CMMI 3.0, plus a lot of new content to address that. But what I will tell you is, in my experience and the experience we're hearing from people on appraisals, is data is one of the most overlooked and under addressed areas in the entire ecosystem of an organization. People don't take care of their data. They don't pay attention to it. They don't look at it well. And then the other thing is making sure that you understand what that actual data is. I'll give you an example. An organization in the Midwest of the United States was doing some AI stuff around insurance. The insurance actuarial tables that they were using were generated by this big, huge lake of data that came out of the Midwest, states like Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, North and South Dakota. What's the population in those states? What was happening is this insurance company found that a bunch of applications for their insurance were getting denied because the data that they were using in their actuarial tables didn't actually match their target customers. It was basically Midwest, predominantly white Anglo-Saxon people, and it didn't address people of color or any other things. So again, those are things that are hidden in AI that you've got to pay attention to. There are other things around machine learning, robotic process automation, advanced manufacturing. What I'll tell you is what we're doing with CMMI for 2025 is we're looking at all the best practices. We've got a team of almost 30 people and 30 companies worldwide that's helping us develop new content. So I would like to answer this question with a stay tuned for more. When we release 2025, a lot of those answers are going to be in there to address that. We had one more question I see here, which is around a consulting company that develops software. If the client requires knowing the cost of the project from the beginning and they promote delivery of components, it could basically lead to resizing of the project because that's not really want. So how does that fix in a fixed price? I'd go back to that's requirements. You need to address that up front. You need to put that from an Agile perspective, minimum viable product. You've got to address that and get agreement. So one of the things I would tell you is take your requirements development and management practice area in the CMMI, couple it with decision analysis and resolution, and bring that to your customer and say, here's how we're going to make decisions for you on the project. These are your requirements. If you're going to change requirements, the cost, the schedule, the functionality is going to change. Do you want to see the ripple effect? Now we can tell you what that is. Hope I answered those questions. We're a minute over. Mariana, Ellie, folks, how do you want? I'll turn it back over to you and say thank you again for inviting me. Thank you all for attending. Been very much a privilege to talk with you tonight. Feel free to reach to me. The slides will contain my email and so forth. So Mariana and team, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you very much for attending this webinar. And thank you for all the folks for ISACA, especially to Ron, Kim, Lindsay, and also to Simona that connected to us. So thank you to all of you and happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.